Bullies tear her dead mom's dress. Her revenge will shock you. A story by Heartfelt Tales. From the very first moment Emily stepped into Jefferson High's glittering school dance party, she knew she didn't belong. The gym had been transformed into a sea of twinkling lights and shimmering decorations, with music pumping and students dancing like they had no care in the world. But Emily Carter, the new girl, stood just inside the doorway, clutching the sides of her pale blue dress, a dress her late mother had sewn for her. It wasn't flashy or expensive like the other girls' gowns, but it carried love in every stitch. The dress had been her mother's final gift, completed just days before the cancer finally won its cruel battle. Emily remembered finding it hanging in her closet with a note pinned to the collar, "For my beautiful daughter, to wear when you need to remember how strong and loved you are. Dance like the star you've always been. Love, Mom." The memory made her chest tight, but it also filled her with a warmth that no amount of teenage cruelty could extinguish. Emily had only moved to this town 2 weeks ago after her father's job transfer, and she had been silently enduring the sideways glances, the whispers, and the cold shoulders since day one. High school cliques were already formed, and no one was eager to make room for her. The transition had been brutal, eating lunch alone, walking through crowded hallways in isolation, sitting in the back of every classroom while whispered conversations flowed around her like she was invisible. Her father, David, had tried his best to help her adjust. Every evening, he'd ask about her day with hopeful eyes, and every evening, Emily would force a smile and tell him everything was fine. She couldn't bear to add to his burden. He was still grieving too, working longer hours to distract himself from the empty spaces in their new house where her mother's laughter used to fill the silence. But tonight, she promised herself, would be different. She would try to smile, maybe even dance, and finally feel like she belonged somewhere again. She had spent an hour getting ready, carefully styling her dark hair the way her mother used to, adding the small pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's. Looking in the mirror, she could almost hear her mother's voice, "Stand tall, sweetheart. You're braver than you believe." What Emily didn't know was that 3 notorious bully boys, Travis, Cole, and Jared, had noticed her the second she walked in. They were the self-proclaimed kings of Jefferson High, known for their cruel pranks and love of humiliating anyone who dared to stand out. Travis Morrison, the ringleader, came from money and used his family's influence to get away with everything. Cole Stevens was his loyal sidekick, desperate for acceptance and willing to do anything to maintain his place in the hierarchy. Jared Walsh was the muscle, all brawn and no conscience, finding joy in others' pain. They had been watching Emily for weeks, noting her isolation, her homemade lunches, her second-hand backpack. To them, she represented everything they despised: vulnerability, authenticity, and worst of all, someone who didn't worship at their feet. Emily took a hesitant step toward the refreshment table when a sudden, loud voice cut through the music. Well, what do we have here?" Travis sneered, blocking her path with his tall frame. Cole and Jared flanked him like vultures circling prey. "Did you get lost on your way to a thrift shop parade?" Cole laughed, pointing at her dress. "Looks like my grandma's curtains. Who even let you in here? Don't they have standards at this dance?" The music didn't stop, but it felt like the world had gone silent around Emily. Eyes turned toward her, some giggling, others just watching with the morbid fascination of witnessing a car crash. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She wanted to disappear, to run away, but then she remembered the promise she made herself before leaving home, *I won't let them break me. Not again, *. She had been broken before, at her old school, by kids who made fun of her mother's illness, who whispered about her father's tears in the school parking lot after parent-teacher conferences. But this was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to honor her mother's memory by being the strong, kind person she had raised her to be. Emily tried to walk past them, keeping her head high, but Travis suddenly grabbed the hem of her dress and yanked hard. The sound of fabric ripping echoed louder than the music. "No!" Emily gasped, watching in horror as delicate stitches her mother had sewn by hand came apart in Travis's cruel grip. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Jared shoved another piece of fabric, tearing it further while laughing hysterically. "Oops," he said mockingly, "didn't mean to make it worse, or maybe we did." Cole joined in, grabbing at the lace trim that had taken her mother hours to attach. "This is what happens when poor people try to play dress-up with the rest of us." The bullies expected tears, humiliation, and maybe even Emily running out of the dance in shame. But what they didn't expect was the fire that lit in her eyes. Emily's father had raised her differently. After losing her mother, her father taught her to never let anyone define her worth. He had also taught her self-defense as a way to channel her emotions and build confidence, enrolling them both in martial arts classes as a way to cope with their grief. "Your mother was the strongest person I ever knew," he would tell Emily during their training sessions. "That strength lives in you too. Use it to protect yourself and others who can't protect themselves." And right now, every lesson came rushing back like a flood. Emily dropped the torn fabric from her hands and slowly straightened her posture. "You think this is funny?" she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the noise. Travis grinned smugly, stepping closer. "Yeah, new girl. It's hilarious. What are you gonna do about it? Cry to your daddy?" That was their mistake. Emily took one deep breath, feeling every muscle in her body coil like a spring. Her mind went quiet, the way her sensei had taught her, focusing only on the present moment. Then, with a sudden twist of her foot and a graceful spin that looked more like a dance move than self-defense, she ducked under Travis's arm. With incredible speed, she grabbed his wrist, twisted, and sent him flying over her shoulder. He landed hard on the polished gym floor, gasping in shock. Before Cole and Jared could react, Emily spun again, this time catching Jared by his jacket, pulling him off balance, and delivering a sweeping kick that sent him tumbling into a table stacked with punch bowls. The crash was deafening, pink punch splashing across the decorated floor like abstract art. Cole froze, his smirk wiped clean, but Emily wasn't done. With one last turn, like a ballerina moving with deadly precision, she grabbed Cole's arm and swung him across the dance floor. He collided with Travis, who was just struggling to his feet, and both bullies tumbled into the row of metal chairs, crying out in pain. The music had stopped now. The entire dance hall stood still, watching in disbelief as the three self-proclaimed kings of the school lay groaning and helpless on the floor, covered in punch and humiliation. Emily stood tall, breathing hard but steady, a tear sliding down her cheek, not from fear or sadness, but from release. She looked down at her torn dress, then back up at the bullies, and said with unwavering strength, "This dress isn't just fabric. My mom made it for me with her dying hands, stitch by stitch, while she was in the hospital. And you will never, ever, take away the love and strength she gave me. You can destroy the dress, but you can't destroy what it represents." Her voice carried across the silent gym, and in that moment, everyone understood they had witnessed something profound. This wasn't just a fight, it was a declaration of dignity, a refusal to be diminished by cruelty. Teachers rushed in, shocked by the scene. Principal Matthews, who had been chaperoning from the sidelines, couldn't believe his eyes. An ambulance was called for the bullies, who had only minor injuries but plenty of bruised egos. As they were wheeled out, Travis muttered something about getting even, but nobody took him seriously anymore. The power they had wielded over the school through fear and intimidation had shattered that night like glass hitting concrete. And something else happened too, something Emily never expected. One by one, students began to step toward her, not with pity, but with admiration. Sarah Chen, a quiet girl from her English class, handed Emily a sewing kit from the decorations table. "I always carry this," she whispered. "My grandmother taught me that you can mend anything if you're patient enough." Marcus Johnson, the student body president, draped his tuxedo jacket over her shoulders to cover the torn dress. "You okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "That was incredible. Jessica Rodriguez, one of the popular girls who had never acknowledged Emily's existence, approached with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry we never stood up for you before. We were all too scared of them." Someone restarted the music, and before Emily knew it, a circle had formed around her, not to gawk or gossip, but to celebrate. They weren't cheering the violence, they were cheering her courage, her refusal to be broken, her decision to stand up not just for herself but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. For the first time since her mother's passing, Emily felt a sense of belonging. Not because she fought back, but because she had shown everyone the strength that had always been inside her. She had honored her mother's memory not through violence, but through unshakable dignity in the face of cruelty. That night, she danced, not in a perfect dress, not with polished moves, but freely, spinning under the lights like a star refusing to burn out. Sarah helped her pin the torn pieces of the dress together with decorative pins from the craft table, creating something beautiful from the destruction. Marcus taught her the electric slide, and Jessica braided tiny flowers from the centerpieces into her hair. As she spun, Emily thought of her mother smiling down, proud of her little girl who had learned to turn pain into power, who had chosen strength over surrender. The dress might be torn, but the love it represented was unbreakable. By Monday morning, Jefferson High had changed. The bullies walked quietly through the halls, avoiding Emily's gaze. Their reign of terror ended. The same kids who had once ignored her now waved hello, some even asking to sit with her at lunch. Teachers who had witnessed the dance spoke in hushed, respectful tones about the new girl who had stood up to the school's worst bullies. But more importantly, other students began standing up too. When freshman Tommy Rodriguez was cornered by older kids, a group of Emily's new friends intervened. When quiet Rebecca Torres was mocked for her accent, classmates shut down the harassment. Emily hadn't just defended herself, she had shown the entire school that courage could rewrite the story for anyone who dared to stand tall. Emily kept the torn dress, hanging it carefully in her closet next to a photo of her mother. Sometimes she would touch the mended seams and remember that night, not the cruelty, but the strength she had found within herself, and the community that had formed around her courage. Her father noticed the change when she came home that night, saw the light back in her eyes. "How was the dance, sweetheart?" he asked. Emily smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "It was perfect, Dad. I think Mom would have loved it." And in the quiet of their new home, with moonlight streaming through the windows, Emily knew she had finally found her place, not by changing who she was, but by refusing to let anyone diminish the beautiful, strong person her mother had raised her to be. If you felt this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power within us to rise above cruelty, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below what you would have done if you were in Emily's shoes. And don't forget, hit like, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories of courage and resilience.